here we are. We're in person for once.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
I know, right? This is weird. I'm only used to seeing you on a screen.
That's how I felt when we were in, we recently took a trip to London and we saw a play and we saw Brokeback Mountain with Lucas Hedges and Mike Feist, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I told you, Zendaya and Tom Holland were also in the audience.
Yeah.
We didn't talk to them or anything. We just saw them. But it was really weird because these are like all these people that I've never seen.
Yeah.
Not in 2D, like on a computer screen or something. So it was like, it was just weird. They were like, oh God, they're like You're in real. Front of you.
Yeah.
I didn't like it. I was like, nope, I'm going back. This is weird.
It, man.
This is uncomfortable.
Well, here we are. We are in Anaheim, California. Mac is here for VidCon.
Yeah.
Your first time, right?
Yep.
How was it?
Probably my only time.
Yeah.
Not because it's not like bad. It's just that, well, one, I definitely think it's like, and you probably felt the same way last year, or the year when you came. There were at least like 5 different occasions where I was walking in the convention center, and these like group of like young kids would be like running towards me, and they would like go past me, and they would be to someone like they would like run up to a person I had been walking next to for like 30 seconds, like right next to me. And they would be like, hey, can we get a picture to this person? And I turn around and I have never seen that person in my life. Or I had no idea who they were. But apparently they're like a big TikTok or Instagram or YouTube star.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I am like super out of touch than what this audience is going for. There was a seminar called like how to like monetize Fortnite 2.0 or something. So yeah, I think I've outgrown it.
So you're gonna be you're gonna become a Fortnite streamer, basically.
Yeah, it's an easy transition from what I do.
Now I went to VidCon last year and it was the same thing. It was like 99% people I didn't know, and the information was really not that useful. Like maybe 1 or 2 things from one of the panels I thought was kind of cool. I think VidCon's mostly good if you are just like a fan of like whatever TikToker or YouTuber or whatever is starring there. But as a creator, I didn't find it that particularly useful, other than maybe meeting other creators. And this is a chance for us to get together and actually record in person. So, we're going to be talking Succession in this one.
Yes. And there are people who, well, obviously we'll talk about the whole show, but I was actually surprised that there are people who did not enjoy the ending. I mean, I thought it ended perfectly.
I didn't like the ending at first.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it, and I thought it was actually really good.
Which, personally, I think is like what makes a good ending. Whether it was The Sopranos, or The Leftovers, or Barry, which just aired its finale. There was also one where you're watching it, and it's like, it kind of doesn't like sink in. You're kind of like, what? But then, like, the next day, you're like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
Which is in contrast. And, like, there are some where, like, I think The Shield, I think, is a show where the ending is, like, not only very satisfying, but it also is the proper ending of the show. But then you have stuff, again, the people will be very upset when I say this, but I think the Breaking Bad ending is very satisfying for fans. But then when you start to think about it more and more, it holds up less and less the more you think about it. But Succession, it's a show where when it first happens, you're kind of like, but then, or you're almost like pissed off.
Yeah.
But then you're like, oh, of course, this is what had to happen.
Let's give a quick rundown of the show just in case, because it's a relatively new show. And spoilers, we're going to be spoiling the entire show. So if you haven't seen it and you want to, definitely go check it out. But the show follows this family that runs this news media empire. They're obviously inspired by, the Murdoch family that owns Fox News. The news station they run is very like socially conservative. But the overall show is about the patriarch Logan and he has 4 children, but only 3 of them are kind of really relevant to the plot itself. And the question of who is going to take over the company when he retires or whatever. So, and it's one of those shows that deals with a lot of very unpleasant people, like people who are very fucked up emotionally and not good people at all. But it's one of the newest shows HBO's done, and honestly one of the best ones they've done in recent memory.
Yeah, it's funny that like I didn't realize until like obviously Barry was on. I really like Barry and Succession, and then Game of Thrones ended. When Succession started what, a year or two after Game of Thrones?
About 4 years ago, so whatever 4 years ago was.
Oh jeez, I don't even know. Oh wow, wait, did it not take a break? I don't know.
I don't remember.
But I feel like HBO really did kind of hit a lull, especially when Game of Thrones was airing. It kind of because like that's why they had like what 5 spin-offs planned.
Yeah,
It's like all they had. They didn't. There was some other shit like Euphoria. I think was around that time, or actually maybe not even. I don't know. But even Euphoria didn't have. I mean, I guess the Zendaya crowd. But then again, those kids shouldn't be watching that show.
yeah, no.
That like those two like kids who watch Zendaya on like Nickelodeon or Disney, they were not old enough to be watching Euphoria.
Yeah.
I wasn't old enough to be watching Euphoria.
Oh yeah, I've never seen it.
Jesus. And you don't.
I'm not gonna check.
You don't have to.
I did. I can. There's some shows I can just tell immediately that like this isn't for me. Like I'm sure it's fine or whatever, but like there's nothing that appeals to me right here.
Yeah, season 1 was okay. It was very like flashy. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I thought like a pretty visually interesting take on like the edgy teen drama.
Yeah.
Kind of reminiscent of like like One Tree Hill, 90210, all that stuff. Season 2 was shit.
Yeah.
It was like really bad. Like it was like I could do a video strictly.
Yeah.
I think season 3 is coming out. Although the creator Sam Levinson, did you see his new show, The Idol?
Oh yeah, and that show's gotten a lot of publicity for the sexual content in that show.
It's fucking weird.
Yeah.
Like in The Weeknd is like he's trying to play like this like intimidating like bouncer producer. I don't know.
That's funny too because The Weeknd has always been kind of like not really a tough, like a very soft.
Boy.
Yeah. He was on American Dad, and there was like an episode. Yeah, there's an episode of him. I don't know if it was him voicing it, but they did an episode where he's like, very soft. It's like, so that's funny that they portray him as that.
There's like one scene where he's like talking to like a security guard or something, or like a waiter who like he thinks like was looking at his girl, played by Lily Rose Depp, and it's funny because like I don't mean to say, but like. He's like trying to be tough, like get in his face, but he's like 6 inches shorter than the dude, and it just like looks. It's just, and he doesn't like. Sorry, Weeknd, you were good in Uncut Gems, but that's because you were just being yourself. He would. He's just miscast for this. role. He's not good.
But so that show that's another new show that's come out that and it's had a lot of controversy with all the sex stuff in it.
Yeah, and then so because of that, I don't even know if season 3 of Euphoria is going to happen. It might. But yeah, season 2 was such a shit show anyway.
Yeah.
It completely omitted certain characters. It destroyed the arc of others. It set up certain arcs for it'll set up an arc for a character and then just drop it.
Mm-hmm.
And the ending was really bad. I don't know. It was very. I don't know what he was thinking with this one. It's almost like one of those things where I'm like, you remember like when Sherlock season, I think 4 came out, and it was so bad that the fandom, I think H Bomber guy goes over in his video on Sherlock. It was so bad that the fandom was convinced. It's like, no, we have to keep watching because this has got to be part of it. This is bad for a reason, or it was like a dream or something. That's how bad Euphoria season 2 was.
I remember watching season 4 of Sherlock and not liking it, but I honestly can't even tell you what happened. Like I deleted it from my memory. Like I don't remember the plot at all. What happens in that season?
It's funny because like and then when H Bomber guy's video he brought it up. When you go back and watch like even season 1 and 2, they're entertaining, but they're not good. They're like it's very flashy. It's very like. Hey, don't pay attention to what's actually happening because if you do, then you'll think about like the plot and the story, and it's doesn't really hold up.
That's one of those shows that got like way too popular for its own good. Like it became like this, like there was a whole community built up around the show. That I mean, it was a cute kind of quirky show, but I don't know, like not to the level that the fans like elevated it to.
Yeah, and or even H. Bomber, he documented or he sort of illustrated why it was the fact that like in the show, and this is such bullshit. In the show, the whole point is that like when you're watching a mystery, it's kind of cool when you're able to, like, if you pay attention enough, you can sort of follow along and maybe solve the mystery. Whereas in Sherlock, they don't tell you, like, very important information.
Yeah.
So Sherlock can look smart later on.
Yeah.
But it's like, but I didn't know that information.
Yeah.
So it's not, no, stop.
Yeah.
It's very dumb.
I feel like that show got really popular just because the actors and the way that it's written, of like focusing on their characters more than the original Sherlock stories, because most of them are just adaptations of the books, but set in a modern time and actually giving them like quirks and personality traits and stuff that it kind of goes by the wayside in the original books. But I think people are mostly into that and not into the actual like writing and storytelling of the show.
Yeah. But yeah, to loop it back around.
Yeah, we got off track from Succession there.
But Succession has been like one of HBO's like big flagship ones.
Yeah.
It didn't really, season 1, I don't even actually think it got decent reviews, but season 2 is really where it kind of like really became a thing.
Yeah.
And it was, in terms of quality, it is consistent all the way through.
Yeah.
A lot of people were sort of iffy on the ending, or some people didn't like it. They thought it jumped the shark. But I actually think the issue, and again, spoilers, and I don't like to use this because it does seem like a cop-out, especially with Game of Thrones. I really do think it was an issue of people, they wanted it to end a certain way.
Yeah.
But when it didn't, they were like, oh, what the fuck? But then again, like you said, 2 days later, when you actually think about it and think of the arc and think of the characters, you're like, oh, wait, no, that was the proper ending.
So in the 4th season, the patriarch of the family, Logan Roy, dies very early in the season, like the 2nd or 3rd episode. And the 3 siblings who had been fighting for a long time had kind of actually come together and were like united against the father. But now that the father's gone, they kind of all turn on each other by the end. And even though it seems like they're going to support Kendall to take over, in the end, it doesn't happen, and they're all 3 of them don't end up succeeding their father, which I actually think they do kind of in a way, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in terms of the ending itself, it's unsatisfying because none of the characters get it. Like Tom gets it, but not in the way that we thought. Like we thought one of the kids would succeed, would step up and actually triumph over the father, and it doesn't end up happening. And in some ways, I think that is a little bit of a cop-out because, this episode was not written ahead of time as the season finale, or the series finale. Once they had written it, they kind of realized that this was this was a good point for them to stop. And you can kind of feel that, right? It feels like, we were talking about this earlier, it feels like if Whitecaps, the episode of Sopranos, was the ending of the show. Good episode in and of itself, really good. Very good dramatic arc. But it feels like there's still more story we could tell. And I think that's what pisses off a lot of people about this ending. It feels like we could have a 5th season of them dealing with the fallout of Gojo, of them dealing with the fallout of Shiv's betrayal, Tom and Shiv's new relationship dynamic. Like, we could deal with that all in another season, but the show, I think, is deliberately not giving us that kind of ending because, and I'm borrowing this from another critic, but it's not so much a prestige drama like something like Mad Men, which is really focused on character arcs and story arcs. It's more so like a satire. It's closer to like Arrested Development than it is like The Sopranos. Like it's a comedy about these people who are just absolute fuck ups.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably one thing that people don't really. And it was kind of funny because I didn't really. When me and my girlfriend first started watching it, I don't think we really realized too. The show is very, even when it's like deadly serious, like even when like the score,
Yeah,
in particular, is like very highbrow, very astute. So it kind of has this air of like uh, like seriousness and stuff. The story itself is based off a Shakespearean King Lear.
yeah.
Not like a direct correlation, but very similar. A lot of plot threads similar. But what I think people may not get from the show, and I think it probably maybe even turns people off from giving it a shot, is the show is very farcical.
Yeah.
Like, not even like The Sopranos, again, like, as the show went on, like, or even Breaking Bad to some extent, there was comedy in it, but it was still a drama.
Yeah.
Whereas Succession, it's like this weird, brilliant mix where it's almost, it takes itself so seriously.
Yeah.
Whereas while you're watching it, there always seems to be this hint of, like, you shouldn't be because this is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder if that's like a reflection of the characters, because in the finale, when the characters end up not, taking over the company, the final scene where they have their big fallout is almost, it's farcical.
Yeah.
They're yelling at each other like, "I'm the oldest boy."
Yeah.
And they're like, he hits Roman, or like he grabs him like children would. He's like trying to, "Don't do this, Shiv." And again, it's like the music, it's almost like played for like serious drama.
Yeah.
But when you actually step back, it's like, oh, this is a farce. These three, they're trying to be mature and like succeed their father, and they just embarrass themselves in front of the entire world.
Yeah, it's funny too, comparing it to Arrested Development, and like I noticed that it's so fucking similar. The semi-abusive business owner father, 3 sons, 1 daughter, and the daughter is married to kind of this like very feminine, kind of like fuck up of a guy. And comparing it to Arrested Development really ends at the end of the 3rd season on like a cliffhanger, and arguably really shouldn't have continued after that.
Yeah. We don't talk about whatever the hell happened after
well,
season 3.
I actually do like season 4, I'll be honest, but season 5 is absolute garbage. So like, I think it's a good call that they ended here, and it ends here because when they lose control of the company, it's played as this really sad thing until you realize that like all 3 of them have become billionaires from this. Like this, they get the money from the sale. But it's a tragedy because what they were actually fighting for was their father's approval. And they, in their minds, getting the company is getting the love of their father that they haven't gotten throughout the entire show. He's a very, I don't know what the word, like, he's withholding, like abusive and withholding of love. And pitting the children against each other until he can use them. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really a tragedy of a family nature and of the cycle of abuse. So I think that's what the ending is getting at, and it's why the show doesn't continue, even though it feels like it could go on.
Mm-hmm. And I think I've talked about on my channel before. I think we've probably even talked about it. Part of the reason why I would argue, and like you agree, why I think Whitecaps for The Sopranos would be a proper ending, and why I've argued that I thought Breaking Bad should have ended with season 4, is because I think when we're talking about television shows, sometimes we kind of forget that they are, I mean, like, especially serialized shows, not necessarily episodic shows, but when it comes to serialized shows, there is still a dramatic question.
Yeah.
Regardless of, like, how long the show goes on, it could be 7, 8, 10 seasons, whatever. If there's still, there is still a dramatic question in Breaking Bad, Dexter, Sopranos, whatever, The Shield, what have you. And I really think that a lot of shows kind of, the reason a lot of particularly dramas end up fucking themselves over is because they kind of forget what the dramatic question was, or like what the main like question or like point of the show is, and they just keep it going. And then
Yeah.
at some point by like season 5 or 6, you're like, what's going on? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And with Succession, I think one of the, again, like people are upset that like, oh, season 5 there was so much more story, but when we actually think about what was the dramatic question of the show, and it was will Kendall, because like Kendall and Shiv and Roman were kind of there,
Yeah.
and it's like they were kind of threats, but the real meat of the story was Kendall versus Logan. But no, the ending, the dramatic question was who was going to take over, who was going to succeed Logan, and the finale answers that question.
Yeah.
And thus, it's like, oh, well, we could have seen what happened to Roman or Shiv and Tom or Kendall.
Yeah.
But it's like, but where would that have gone?
Yeah.
Because the dramatic question of the series, of the story, has been answered.
And I will say, like, again, there are character arcs which could have been fleshed out more. I think that, again, because it's mostly a satire, it's not going to give everyone like a really satisfying like character arc and a character conclusion. Like one of the biggest like things I think of is like Marcia. They set up like this kind of mystery about her that just doesn't go anywhere. Her background in Lebanon, her children who are only introduced in one episode, like what she's done to kind of get where she is in this life, the relationship between her and Logan, and it never goes anywhere. Maybe to a point, or maybe just because it's trying to be more like real life, where these people sometimes people just disappear, and it's like it's not ever going to be answered specifically what the point of their lives were. But I think there are I think like, those type of things people get upset about because they want that stuff fleshed out. But again, I do think that Critic was right in the sense that it is not necessarily trying to be a prestige drama as much as it is a satire.
Yeah, and we were talking about it at dinner. It was weird because another interesting thing about the show is that there is this sort of, everything seems so polished and so like astute. Like all the settings are like these like incredible like galas or like boardrooms and all this stuff. But then when you actually like look into like what is happening in any given scene, it's just ridiculous. Like some of it's so like some of the characters are so petty. Yeah. And just like their dramas are so just like teenager shit. Yeah. And again, it's like the show is sort of highlighting this idea that, and this is there's a line in the final season when Logan goes to his children, I love you, you're my children, but you are not serious people. And that's kind of him saying like, I don't think any of you can take over this company because you're not serious people. And then in the finale, they prove that very clearly. But then you watch throughout the show, and then you realize that, like, oh yeah, these kids they've just been spoiled brats this entire time. And the show is very impressive in that it still makes you kind of root for them. Even though they're scumbags. Yeah. And the show is very clear that they are. You kind of root for, or you at least understand them. You empathize with what they're going through, even if you don't think that they deserve any sort of... You kind of hope they redeem themselves, even if you don't think they have the capability to, or even deserve to get redemption.
Well, I think that, one of the ways it does that is by showing just how abusive their father was to them, throughout their life. And we see that it was one of those things that I was really... I thought was going to get fleshed out more, but it actually wasn't, which was Logan's background. And, it's implied throughout the show and sometimes outright stated that he was abused growing up too. Like we see when he's swimming, there's scars on the back of his back. And there's a great little detail that when they do the family therapy scene, Shiv has a line where she says their father doesn't know how to swim. We see that that's not true. He does know how to swim. But we get the implication that he just never has swam in front of his children because he doesn't want them to see the scars on his back. He doesn't want to show his vulnerability to them. And we get hints that the family that raised Logan and his brother were kind of abusive. And he continued on that trend to his kids, abusing them all in different ways. And I think that, a lot of people say that none of the children succeeded their father. And that's true in the business, but I really think that all three of them succeeded their father in terms of the abuse and continuing it on. Like Kendall's big thing is Logan's a terrible father, he's not there for the children, blah blah blah. Well, what does he do? He's a terrible father to his kids
He's
as
such
well.
a scumbag.
He is. He's never there for them. He takes them for granted. He's continuing on that trend. Shiv, her whole thing with her mother and the fact that her mother was cold and didn't really deserve to be a mother. Well, what happens to her? She's now pregnant and she's going to continue on the same thing with Tom. Roman is just this abused puppy who's been beaten so many times. He's become a masochist, and that's the only way he can like get off. So I think all of them have continued the cycle of abuse that they've experienced, and I think that's at the core of the family drama that is throughout all their lives.
It was funny though because I actually think we agreed. Roman actually has a sort of it's funny because at first you think it's like, oh man, they all get fucked over.
Yeah.
But then you actually like look and it's like, well, actually no, like Kendall pretty much does. Like he's completely lost at that point. Shiv is kind of 50-50. I mean, she still attains a better position than she would have attained because again, like one of the big questions in the finale is like, well, why does Shiv fuck over Kendall? And it's like, well, because it was already established in the season that Kendall and Roman had the propensity to go behind Shiv's back.
Yeah.
Because they lied, because they wanted to cancel the Gojo deal, and they didn't let Shiv in. So in Shiv's mind, it's like, well, we're all like, oh, siblings and cool, but once Kendall takes the big seat, how do I know I'm going to be protected?
Yeah.
And so, and then again, we were talking about the ending. A lot of people, or one of the big critiques was like, well, why did Shiv decide to turn on Kendall in the very end? And again, I think it's like you and we agree. It's very obvious why. But it's a combination of like, one, I don't think people are like really paying attention to like the actual show. They're kind of projecting certain things about the characters, or like they're letting their wants of what they want in the show to happen superseding what should happen based on the characters. And two, I think that like when it comes to like female characters and like dude bros, it's just like it's always like throughout like I see, or it even happened I think like on the Succession subreddit, they were like Kendall, and not everyone, like a lot of the fans also like agreed, like some dudes are weird about it, they'll like bend over backwards to defend Kendall being like a deadbeat dad and doing all this shit. But then anytime like Shiv does something, it's just like they just see everything in the worst possible light.
Yeah.
The fact is, in the end, Shiv realized that like, as much as she wants to be, like the CEO and like the girl boss, that just a sort of segue. What I really liked about the show too is how they really lampoon the idea of how Shiv is like, framed as like this girl boss, like, oh, she's like the woman who's gonna like, beat the men, but it reveals that actually she's just a spoiled brat who doesn't know anything. But meanwhile, then you have the real women like Jerry and Caroline. Yeah. These are women who are actually competent and actually know how to do their jobs. Yeah. But Shiv is the one who's like, I think I'm hot shit. Yeah. And then she like fucks up horribly. Yeah. But in the end, from Shiv's point of view, she realizes, hey, if Tom is CEO, then, and I'm pregnant with his child, we still have something there in our relationship. Yeah. Maybe this is the best. Is depressing as it is for her, like you said, now she's her mother. Yeah. Which is like probably her worst nightmare. It still is some semblance of control over the company.
And I think Tom's arc, that one was really satisfying, and it really felt like cohesive throughout the whole show, which is him growing from a very weak, subservient person to being the dominant one in that relationship. There's a great scene at the end where he puts his hand out and kind of forces her to take it. Yeah, and it's like he's become the dominant one in the relationship, which is really great to see because, he's just been used and taken for granted, and finally decides at one point that, no, I'm gonna fight for me like everyone else on the show does for themselves. They're all so selfish. And that's why he ends up becoming CEO, because he was willing to put himself and his own needs ahead of anyone else's. And I think that was a great, really complete story arc. That, yeah, a lot of other characters don't get the same kind of treatment. I think Greg's storyline, I mean, is pretty good, but I think it's left, like, it could have been developed a little more. I mean, he becomes morally corrupt like the rest of the family, but it would have been nice to see him get like a really, get a little more development in the end there.
Well, I think it goes back to your point about like it being a farce. I always saw the Greg storyline as like the clear like thread of humor of the show. Like Greg was sort of like he never had like one thing that kind of bugs me is like I see on Twitter people like saying it's like, oh well, the Nicholas Braun who plays Greg, he never has like any chance like to act or like to like have any range, and it's like I think that was the point. I think his entire character was just like this like goofball who just kind of falls into it, and he just kind of keeps, and that kind of it almost accentuates this whole idea of like all these characters who it's like, oh yeah, you have to be competent to like reach the top, you have to be a killer. And here's fucking Greg, just kind of like flying by the seat of his pants, and he actually ends up pretty damn well.
Yeah, definitely one of the funnier characters on the show. And he's got some good moments there. Like he's, for much as being portrayed as an idiot at the beginning, he's actually very like smart to be like constantly making moves to try to get ahead, even in small ways. Like in the beginning, he's like trying to decide whether to do what Shiv told him or do what Roman told him. And he decides to decide with Shiv, and then to copy those documents and blackmail Tom. So I mean, a lot of good moments there, but again, not necessarily all fleshed out story arcs from point A to point B. But I mean, for what the show is, and all that it covers, really, really good for keeping you invested in like what's going on. It's a very plot heavy show too, in the sense that a lot of emphasis is put on like, are the business deals going to go through, and I think that messes with the pacing a little bit. But for what it was, I had to watch the show straight through. Like as soon as I started it, I was like, no, I have to finish this show because it is that good.
And it really was. We talked about it again at dinner. It was interesting where, and I think even the writers said this, when you first watch the show, it can be a little, what's what I'm looking for? A little bit heavy in terms of the business terminology, and like, for example, in season 2, there's a whole plot about an acquisition of a company, and then eventually they decide to, cut its legs off. And sometimes when you're watching it can be kind of heavy in terms of, there are moments where the lingo is kind of heavy, and you're not exactly sure what exactly is going on in terms of the business. But this is what the writers explained. They didn't want to sacrifice, because again, like, it would be silly for like the characters who have been in this business for like decades to start talking in layman's terms of explaining it to the audience. Like, hey, this is what this means. Like, they already know what it means.
Yeah.
But the writers were good enough where even if you didn't understand exactly what was happening with the business, you could still get a sense of, if this happens, this would be good. If this happens, this will be bad for the company.
Yeah.
You don't really understand why always. Like, again, if you're really in the business, you can kind of you get it. But even if you're not, you can still generally get the gist of what is going on. And that's what I think was really cool about the show, where it, even if you're not like, you don't have to be super tuned into everything going on. I think that does add a bit of a lot of nuance and a lot of, richness to the story.
Yeah.
But you can still follow along with the story, even if you're not like, it's like, oh yeah, the Gojo deal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Volter. It's like, oh yeah, but I kind of know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and that leaves more room to focus on the characters, not just talking about, business the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, what else is there to say about Succession?
It was like really good. I don't even have any. I'm trying to think on like flaws. I'm sure on like a rewatch I could probably point out some, but like in general, I think it was a really quality all the way through.
Yeah.
Season 1 I think is a bit not weak. It's still really good, but it was finding its footing.
Yeah.
Season 2 is really where I don't know if I would say it's its peak, because season 4 is really good, but season 2 is like a perfect
really
season
good.
of television.
Season 3 is really good too. I mean, the whole show is fantastic.
Yeah, season 3 is good, but it is a transitionary period.
Yeah.
It kind of has, well, there's 2 separate arcs. There's the first arc of, at the end of season 2, Kendall betrays Logan. He tries to become the killer. And the first half of the season 3 kind of focuses on, Kendall trying to get back at Logan.
Yeah.
But by the middle of the season, that kind of dissipates.
Yeah.
But it works because come the end of season 3, it's when Kendall has decided, I don't want this anymore. I'm done. I'm done trying to win your approval. I want out.
Yeah.
And it's so tragic rewatching that scene, considering what happened in season 4.
Yeah.
Where it's like the ghost of Logan, even after his death, like still has Kendall by the throat. And I just wish, like, oh man, imagine if Kendall was able to just leave and he had that moment of clarity, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out.
No, I mean they're all too invested in the toxicity of their family to, again, realize that walking away would be the best thing, and they all have the money to do it now. They can do their PGM deal, whatever. They could do the 100, whatever their startup idea was, but again, that's not what it was about. It was about trying to heal their wounds by getting their father's approval, which was never going to happen. It was never going to have a happy ending for this show.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, that was probably why they disliked it, is because they almost kind of like forgot who one thing that the show does so well is that it takes these characters who are objectively horrible. They're like, they have billions of dollars. They're fine. There's no real reason that you should feel bad for the characters when anything happens. But because you empathize with them so much, because like even Tom's kind of a dickhead too. Like there's a lot of like, he's not like a good guy. It's like an innocent guy. Like no, he knows what business he's in. He knows what he's doing.
Absolutely.
But even so, the scene where he confronts Shiv in season 4, where they finally clear the air, that was such an awesome scene.
Yeah.
And despite how much of a spineless little bitch he's been, to see him finally stand up for himself. And just like call everything out.
Yeah.
And what was so sad about that scene too is that everything Tom says is correct.
Oh yeah.
That's what was weird about it. Is like, you'd think it'd be like Shiv and Tom airing things out. But then you realize that like everything Tom says is like objectively correct.
Oh yeah.
But then everything Shiv says is just like kind of bullshit.
Oh yeah.
It's like, but then at the same time you almost feel for her, because you can tell that part of the reason she kept Tom at a distance is because, and she even says it, she never believed that Tom actually loved her, which was not true. He truly, at least from my perspective, he truly did love her. But because of her upbringing, she always felt like love was this transactional thing, or marriage was this transactional thing, that he would tell her straight up, like, I love you, I want to be with you, and she just couldn't believe it. She wasn't like, and that's again like another part where a lot of like dude bros like get wrong about her character. They're like, oh, she doesn't appreciate Tom, she doesn't get, not realizing that it's like a defense mechanism based off of her upbringing.
And I mean, Tom absolutely was trying to, move up in the world, and that's partially. He even admits that to her too, that he likes nice things, and he wanted to be rich, and this was also a way to do that. But he did love her, and again, I think that's his storyline is probably the most complete storyline throughout the show of his growth from weakling to dominant CEO now. And yeah, it was just really, really enjoyable to watch.
It's really weird how, at the end of the day, the most healthy relationship ends up being between Connor and Willow.
Yeah, Connor is one of those characters who, again, he's not involved with the main, action of Succession, because even though he's the firstborn son, he's not. I don't think he actually shares in the company the way the other three do. And he's very much the comic relief of the show. And his relationship is with Willa, the former prostitute turned horrible playwright. The play she makes is called Sand, and he has to buy like 5 cubic tons of sand for the thing. Like, it's just so funny. But their relationship it's awful in the sense that, like, it's clear this woman does not love him. At least not in the way that he loves her.
Well, that's the thing. It's like at the end of in season 4, after Logan's death, there's a great scene where they sit down and they kind of level with each other. Yeah. It's like Connor's like, and again, it's like this throughout the entire show. It's been this like unspoken thing of like Willow's with Connor, and it's like, okay, it's about the money, and they finally sit down, and Connor's like, "Are you with me just for my money?" And she genuinely like considers, and she's like, that is a part of it, of course. I think we both know that. We've always known that.
Yeah.
But we've been through so much, and we're on each other's side. Then and it was weirdly wholesome. It was these two people, despite how toxic and despite how sort of fucked up their relationship is, the fact that they recognize that and they accept it, it's somehow way healthier than any other relationship where everyone's just bullshitting and they're not being straight with each other, and the fact that of all relationships, those two were the most wholesome and like had the happiest ending. It was very brilliant writing.
Plus, he was interested in politics from a very young age. God.
Alan Ruck, like, that is such a sleeper performance where it's like you think Connor is like that's the thing. It's like he's cringy, but like Alan Ruck plays him so perfectly. We're like, he's so cringy, but he's never too over the top.
Yeah.
Where you think that like he's like, he never comes off as just like a meaningless comic relief character. Yeah. He's still a very good character, but just the way he plays it, he's so delusional. My favorite was it was during the election. So he's running, and they're like, "Hey, Con, we'll give you this country, the ambassadorship if you drop out." Yeah. And then he's like, "No, I believe in myself." And then the moment he loses, he's like, "So, about that ambassadorship."
Okay, I get the thing. Yeah.
And he's already making plans. He's like, "Let's go."
And the same thing is true with the the presidential storyline. Like, it's never answered whether that guy is going to become the president or not, or the trial, or the case going to overthrow it. And again, that's something they build up the consequences of ATN and its effect on the election, but never pay it off directly. And again, I think that's very deliberate with the show. It's leaving an open question. It's like, did what these people do, is it going to destroy America? Is it going to be fine? Is it not going to matter either way because he's not going to become president? It leaves it open question, because I think a lot of times in life, we don't know the consequences of our actions. And it's not until a long time after that we'll actually see what effect those decisions had on life.
I think that's like one of the big things that a lot of people kind of don't understand when it comes to storytelling. Sometimes they focus too much on like, and this is another reason why I think a lot of people who were like, "Oh, there should have been a season 5 of Succession." This is why I think they're kind of off base, because they're always wondering about like what happens, as opposed to instead of, they're so focused on what happens as a result of the action, or what might happen as a result of the action, they forget, or they kind of look past the implications of the action itself. Oh, yeah. So like you mentioned with the whole presidential election and ATN, the point isn't, it's like, oh, will Mencken go on to be like a fascist leader and like destroy the country and like, like put homeless people in camps? The issue isn't, that's not the question. The focus should be the fact that Roman and Kendall are willing to do that if it meets their own ends. Yeah. There's that great moment where Kendall, again, he has them very sparingly, but there's that brief moment of clarity where he's sitting with Shiv and he's like, "I don't think this is the right thing." But then, and it's a tender moment, where he's actually opening up to his sister. But then, like, 4 seconds later, he finds out that Shiv fucked him over.
Yeah.
And then he immediately, all that moment of clarity. And again, you can, like, this is another issue where people be like, it's like, oh, well, it was Shiv's fault. But you have to realize, it's like, Kendall realized what he was doing was wrong.
Yeah.
He knew that this wasn't what was in his heart. He knew this wasn't the right choice. But because of that moment of pettiness, of, like, being pissed off at Shiv, his own desire for revenge or for his own anger or pettiness overrode that, and they told him to call the election.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, I hate when people are like, it's like, oh, well, what actually will happen? It's like, it doesn't matter. It matters about the fact that Kendall and Roman knew this might happen, or they knew what probably will happen, and they took that action anyway.
Yeah. No, it's definitely great characterization for all of them. That I think the same thing is true of Shiv too. Like, I mean, she talks a big game about, like, her liberal politics or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's just a way for her of, like, making herself special or rebelling against her dad. I don't think any of them have, like, real genuine opinions about opinions, but not any kind of conviction for standing up for what they believe in. They're just trying to do what gets them ahead. And the same thing is probably true of Logan Roy, even though they paint him a lot in the show as, like, this, like, really conservative person, hates, always wants a Republican president or whatever. I think that too was just his way of getting power and using his media empire to influence the world and push the world forward. He made, it's like Kendall's eulogy to him at his funeral. No matter what you thought of the man, what he was doing was moving the world, like pushing it forward.
For better or worse.
For better or worse, yeah.
That's actually a good point, because I think sometimes, particularly when we're talking about, like, the model of, like, Logan Roy, I think sometimes we almost, like, give these types of people almost too much credit, where we're like, oh, this person is, they're creating this empire to push their own ideological bends and yada 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 and rule the world for their own means. When you point out, and I actually think this is pretty evident in the show, I actually don't think throughout the show Logan ever really speaks on his own personal ideology.
Yeah.
In terms of politics or ethics or morals. You're right, he's just like this machine. He's just like this monster where it's just about gaining influence. No matter what that means. It doesn't really even matter to what end. And I think that's what's so depressing about, again, he's not a good person.
Yeah.
Logan Roy, there's nothing redeemable about him. But it's almost like tragic when there's that great scene in season 4 where he asks his bodyguard, and this is the episode before he dies, right? Maybe there's an episode before that, I'm not sure. But it's almost like he could sense it was the end, and he was like, is this all there is?
Yeah.
And you realize that, like, this man, he built this empire and did all this, but for what?
Yeah.
And but I almost think that is, in many ways, a lot more realistic because, like, if you actually, like, look at a lot of these, like, mega mogul types, it gets to the point where it's like, once you hit, like, $1 billion, your quality, or actually, what have they done? Studies? And they're like, I think at, like, $80,000, like, happiness kind of, like, levels off.
Yeah.
Like, and when I say that, it's like, it's not to say, like, having more money doesn't make your life easier.
Yeah.
But around, like, 80K is when, okay, you have all your shit financially taken care of. You can go on vacations. You can feed yourself. Everything else beyond that is interpersonal relationships, passion, etc., etc. And it seemed like Logan was a character, and in many ways the kids are too, but Logan was a character who, like, didn't have the interpersonal relationships. He didn't even have the capacity for that.
Yeah.
So his entire life was just about, well, I'll just build more and more and earn more and more and more. But again, to what end? To die on an airplane toilet?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was about the power that all the money in their empire brought them. It's I think Connor has a line too when Kendall's about to take over the company. He's like, anyone can get a few $1 million or whatever, but with this company and this name, we're somebody. It's like the world has to account for us, rather than not just being rich, but like being influential, by being able to control who the president's going to be. There's all this stuff that they can do. There's a great quote from Uncle Ewan. He's quoting Bertrand Russell, and he says, "Life is a constant struggle to be the criminal rather than the victim."
Yeah.
And you can tie that to the abuse throughout that all the characters experience. You can say that, or infer that Logan's need to control the world and dominate the world and dominate his family was because of the powerlessness he felt as a kid, and that's his kind of response to it. It's continuing the cycles of abuse, and I think that's really what the show is all about, is those traumas and the hurt that it creates and the scars it leaves on all the characters.
It's interesting too, you brought up about Shiv and her like whole, at the beginning she's kind of like, she has these sort of, like, it almost sets it up where she'll be like, she's the more liberal-minded one, and she's the one who doesn't like, her family's, even at the final episode the final season, where she's like, it's like, no, you can't vote him in because he's a fascist. It really does get to a point where it's like, I don't even know if, like, do you even believe this?
Nah.
It's like, do you even have, or even in, again, season 3, when Kendall, after he, we were joking about it, after he fucks over Logan, there's the whole arc where he's, like, trying to be, like, it's like,
super woke,
feminism, fight the patriarchy. But, of course, like, it's very clear that, like, he doesn't give a shit about any of that. It's just a means to an end. And then, but then, like you said, it's like, it gets to the point where it's like, we're almost giving these characters too much credit. They don't even have ideologies.
No.
They don't even have, and I almost wonder, in a way, I think that's almost more realistic to a lot of online political discourse. I think a lot of people don't really even have ideologies. They just kind of, they feel a certain way about something and they'll say it. And whether it's on the left or right, they just kind of, they don't really have ideologies. They're just kind of, they feel certain ways about certain things, and they just ascribe to whoever makes them feel the most validated. But they don't actually ascribe to any sort of set of ethics or values.
No.
And so in that sense, in a way, it almost like reduces it makes their characters less rich or less, but almost in a like a purposeful, more realistic, like, these characters are sort of just like empty vessels whose only desire is to gain this power, and in a way it makes them less complicated but more realistic in a way.
I mean, again, they're trying to fill the hole in their hearts that family is not there, and they're trying to fill it with money or status or whatever they can get, but it's just ultimately not going to make them happy or satisfied, because that thing that they really want, which is their father's approval, it's just never going to happen.
Yeah. What's also interesting is that the show never... So there's one scene we can talk about, but what's interesting is that the show doesn't have an excess of these. There are a few. Well, actually, no, there really aren't. The show doesn't have, like, an excess of, like... Because, like, a show about, like, a traumatized family, you would think there is a lot of moments of, like, characters, like... Back when I was like 10 and you did this, like, where characters are kind of like trauma dumping so the audience can like relate to them. There are I don't even know if there are any scenes like that where the characters just like tell you about the trauma of their childhood. Like, they'll mention little details here and there, but it never comes out as like a forced monologue.
Oh yeah, no.
So when it comes to the dynamics of the characters and their father and Logan, you really have to observe. And there's one scene, it was in season 2, I forget, Shiv did something stupid, of course, because that's what she does. Thinks she's girl boss, and then her plans blow up. She does something stupid that embarrasses Logan. And they're all in the meeting room. And obviously, like, Logan is pissed off at Shiv. But Shiv is his little girl, so he can't do anything. But then Roman steps in and is like, oh yeah, you tortured the old dinosaur. And Logan, who's upset, he can't take it out on Shiv, and so he slaps Roman, knocks out a tooth. And then immediately, and again, what's so interesting is that at this point in the show, Logan has Kendall by the balls.
Yeah.
Like he's like his little like errand boy. But in that moment, Kendall steps up and is like, "Don't fucking touch him."
Yeah.
And people have pointed out how that one little scene is their entire dynamic.
Yeah.
Like you have Logan, you have the little princess, the spoiled princess who can do whatever and won't be harmed. You have Roman, who everything bad gets taken out on him because he's a little puppy, and then you have Kendall, who's the older brother who has to protect the little brother. And in that one scene, you're like, "Oh, that's it right there."
Oh, yeah.
We don't need 8 monologues of like, which so many shows do, and it's so cringy.
And there's a scene in the next episode where Roman and Logan are together, and Logan's like, "Oh, did I hit you? Like, I mean, I didn't even know you were there." Like, just totally like sweeping it under the rug, the fact that he knocked his son's tooth out. And then Roman like acts like it didn't even happen, and that's very telling. That must have been how their childhood was like too, where he basically learned that like there's not gonna be any consequences for this, so better to just pretend it like it never happened. And the Kendall thing is so beautiful because in the last scene too, when he brings up his children, he ends up again. It's like he's squeezing his head, like choking him maybe. But he's, again, become their father, now abusing Roman, too. And again, Roman doesn't fight back in any way. He, like, his hands go to his side. Like, he, like, completely, he's learned helplessness. And again, it's just that tragedy of the abuse that they all went through that has just completely broken these characters.
Well, he does it again, too, because, and I think that's what's so tragic about Kendall is because there are times when the characters, their inner selves, the good in them shines through.
Yeah.
I in retrospect, I actually do think, at the end when her plan backfires and she's begging Kendall and Roman not to approve Mencken.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I do actually think that like there was a hint of decency in her where she's like, this isn't right. We shouldn't do this. But at that point, it was already too late.
No.
Or even when she opened up to Tom about her pregnancy, and Tom doesn't believe her, which is completely warranted.
Oh, yeah.
People, like, roasted him on Twitter, and they're like, oh, my God. They're like, I can't believe he did. It's like, it's totally warranted.
Oh, she would 100% lie.
But then you saw her face, and you realized that, like, it's like, yes, she has made her... It's like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, where it's like, she made this bed herself, but you still feel for her that she realizes. And then there was a really short scene it was episode 4 of season 4. It was when Carrie, who was Logan's mistress, / assistant or whatever, she comes after his death, and she's like very, very, she truly loved him. She was heartbroken. And Marsha, Logan's wife, or they were separated, I guess, at the time, coldly dismisses her.
Yeah.
Like, is very harsh to her, which understandable.
Yeah.
I get it. But in that moment, that was a moment where Roman steps in.
Yeah.
And it's like he was very kind to her.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to the ending where he almost is like relieved to be done with this fucking family.
Yeah. It's like,
so you see the good within him there. And then with Kendall, the good within him is when where he defends Roman. And there's a great moment in season 4, or the election episode where Shiv is talking about we shouldn't, vote for Mencken, and then Tom's like, "You sound a little unhinged," and then Kendall immediately is like, "You fucking watch it, Tom."
Yeah,
and people like that those little moments of his like instinct to defend his siblings, even when he's fucking them over the next scene.
Oh yeah,
that's like, oh, there's a hint of good in you. There is a potential for you to be a good person. You have something there, but it just gets wasted.
I feel it. Well, I feel like we've covered everything about the show. Any kind of final thoughts as we wrap up our little hour here?
Yeah, watch Succession. It's really good.
It's really fucking good.
Yeah, like it's just all the performances, the casting is incredible.
Oh yeah,
everything. Who do you think is gonna? So one of the big, I definitely think that. So initially, actually, I don't even know if she's been nominated, But Sarah Snook, who plays Shiv
Yeah.
Roy in the show, I think that she had been nominated maybe before in the supporting actress category, but now they're pushing for her to be a lead actress. And she actually has I saw like the frontrunner list. I think she actually has a strong chance of winning. I would love Ray Seahorn to win for Better Call Saul, but I think she might actually they might put her in supporting. But yeah, no, Sarah Snook won Best Actress. However, what's interesting is that I think they were because Jeremy Strong won Best Actor in a Leading Role for season 2. I don't think he won for season 3. Who won? The Squid Game guy? I don't remember.
I don't pay attention.
Yeah, no. But they're actually considering, which is rare because they usually don't like to split the vote. They're actually considering nominating Kieran Culkin for Best Leading Actor.
Yeah.
Which I definitely think he had some excellent.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I almost would wonder if it was between him and Jeremy Strong for season 4. I think Kieran should win.
Yeah.
He was excellent.
Really
and
good
then
scenes.
I don't think Brian Cox. They probably would nominate him for season 4. He's only in a couple episodes. Yeah. So. They nominate the one where he's just dying in the toilet and says like nothing.
Or maybe the one where he's like just in a flat, like the camera from his birthday or whatever.
Or just in the coffin.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows?
But yeah, Kieran Culkin win, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But
well, definitely go watch Succession. It's a fantastic show. And stay tuned for the next No One's a Critic, which probably won't have us together like this.
Probably
again,
not in Anaheim, no.
No. But this was good. I mean, I really like doing this in person. There's a lot more. It's a lot easier to have like back and forth than like on the screen where it's like the timing is a little bit off.
You're waiting for the person,
exactly.
or you get like sidetracked and you're like, what?
So what did you say? All right. Well, thank you all for watching and stay tuned for the next one coming soon.
Take care, y'all.